So this week's company presentation is from Implement, and we're going to hear something interesting about developing and executing new business models in established companies. And that's, I think, is very interesting because that entails a complete redesign, also a change of strategy, build on what we know about our customers. And talking about this, Facebook, I just got this nice comment that, was it Politiken? Politiken, the newspaper Politiken had an article today saying, well, if you're on Facebook, you're officially old. So there's something about this. So welcome to you guys, and it's going to be interesting. So the floor is yours, and please ask questions and comment on this, because discussion is fun and it makes us all more interesting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's see if this works. Does it work? Can you hear me?
Fantastic. Good.
Yeah? Okay. And the clicker, did that go there? Yeah, okay. So welcome to this next hour on developing and implementing new business models. What we're going to try and do is give you a perspective on how we work with that exact topic at Implement. Before we do that, we'll just give you a bit of introduction to our company and who we are, where we're located, how many we are, and so on. And then Mads Christian will take us through a few case examples on building and executing business models. So that's it. And then hopefully, we'll have a lot of Q&A as we go. We also have some pre-programmed questions for you guys, so you won't be allowed to keep completely shut. Basically, the reason it's us today is because we represent two different practices in Implement. We are divided into roughly 10 different practices, and two of them work with business models all the time. I come from the strategy practice, where we normally look at a bit longer term business models, market outlook. I see a lot of what you've drawn up here. That's exactly how we work. But we have a perspective that's 3, 5, sometimes actually 10 years out, especially on the trends part. So and that's because a business model obviously needs to be durable. You might develop something that works for a year and might be very profitable or growth oriented in a year, but a few years down the line, competitors will have caught up and you're completely dead, right? So that's why we try and work with the sustainable part of a business model. Mads?
Yeah, and you could say that I represent the innovation practice, and here we take a lot of what then Morten and the strategy practice have outlined in terms of direction and so on, and make it more tangible and make short, accelerated processes together with our clients to develop, for instance, new product services or entirely new business models, actually. And I also, during the presentation, come with a couple of examples of where we have done this. And you're, of course, more than welcome to ask questions. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just by show of hands, real quick, have any of you heard of Implement Consulting Group before? A few of you? Okay. We need to do something about our recruiting, I can see. Note to self. But I'll just jump to this one. This is just briefly who Implement is. It's a Danish-founded consulting company. We now have offices all across the Nordics, and we have an office in Switzerland as well. A little bit by chance, but because there was a great partner we knew in Switzerland, and we decided to merge with them. We were founded in '96, and we've been growing quite steadily ever since, adding different services. And hi, should I move? Yeah, okay, sorry. Adding services, adding clients, and so on. We've been growing about 20% roughly each year, whether it's in number of people or revenue. We have a pretty simple value proposition to the market. So if you go into this box, and say, what is Implement's value proposition? You need something that's quite differentiated in a market that consists of consulting companies that are very, very established, the likes of McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group, etc. So we needed to try to have a different voice in the market, and invent a new kind of business model. And this is kind of the illustration on that. So most consulting companies are very, very good at providing the answer. That's what they're invited in to do by a board or a management team. Please tell us what to do. Should we buy this company? Should we move into this market? Should we divest this part of the business? You know, give us an answer based on an analysis. And then you hand that over, and it's a big report, and that's basically what you as a consultant do. And we decided a different approach, which was much more about along this axis, is, you know, in order to make whatever change happen, you need to actually guide the client along the way. So if they need to move into a new market, you need to actually help them implement that change together with them. So that was kind of how we defined our business model differently when we were founded, working a lot along this axis. And that's what we've been doing ever since. So whenever people work with us, they'll always tell us it's very implementation oriented, but we also want to, of course, guide the client and tell them this is best practice, this is how you should think about an analysis and so on. So that's just to tell you a little bit about us and our attempt to be different in the market. We are growing a lot and we need great people. So please keep us in mind whenever you consider applying. If you want to go into consulting, keep Implement in mind. We have a lot of engineers in our company. We were founded by a few PhDs in engineering, which were really frustrated about the fact that actually making impact happen from projects was so damn difficult. So that was their focus in combination with being, so of course, sharp, analytical, and data-driven. So you can see we recruited 226 people last year, and we're looking to do the same, because the only way we can grow is by getting new people on board and then trying to keep them in our company for longer. So enough about Implement. We are quite inspired when it comes to business models by both what you could call strategy guys, great thinkers such as Alex Osterwalder, Clayton Christensen, and so on. We're also inspired by what we here call innovation guys. And these guys are guys that think fundamentally different about implementing or developing new innovations. And we have sort of used both the strategy long-term thinkers and the really crazy innovative guys to try and form our view on developing new business models. So I encourage you, if you don't know who these guys are, to read about them if you're interested in developing new business models. Whether it's disruptive innovation by Clayton Christensen, of course Osterwalder, you probably know him from this course, and you have the book. There's also this guy, I think Eric Ries is his name. Mm-hmm. He wrote a book on lean startup, which is really, really cool because it takes sort of lean thinking and process efficiency into building a startup, which is usually a really messy process. And a lot of the existing corporate organizations out there that, if they don't change their business models, will be disrupted at some point. They are actually using some of these techniques from his book to develop new business models. When you think about new business models and innovation as such, you can tackle that from many different angles. And here is, I think, 10 Types of Innovation is also a great book. Here are 10 types of innovation that you might apply when you develop a new business model in an existing company. You could be, from the one side, you could be very profit oriented. So whatever you're building of a new product or new market entry, etc., it needs to deliver profits fast. You could also be extremely concerned about your brand, which is over here. that it needs to deliver a completely different brand experience, or it needs to deliver a completely differentiated customer engagement experience. So the point about these 10 types of innovation is the following. So he did a study, the guy who wrote this book, of several hundreds of companies, established big corporations that try to innovate their business model. And what he found was that the average performers, what he called average innovators, you know, the ones that came out with a new product, it didn't really grow, didn't really deliver product, didn't really steal market share. 84% of that category used 0 to 2 of the above mentioned innovation types. And if he looked and tried to isolate the really successful ones, the top quartile, or the top performers, they used 71% of those used 3 or more out of these. So it just proves the point that when you think about developing a new business model, you probably need to attack that from many different angles. You need to attack it from a profit angle, from a brand angle, from a product angle, from a process angle. There can be many roads to Rome, so to speak. We and Mads Christian, maybe you can elaborate on that later. We helped a company like Tetra Pak develop the new milk carton. You probably know Tetra Pak, they develop milk cartons, right? And for that they invited to a big global program, an open innovation program. They invited everything from psychologists to mathematicians to Japanese origamists, you know, and just put them in a room for 2 months and say, develop a new milk carton for us. So the point here is, when you do this, and if you're an established industry, it's not easy. You probably need to really invest in it and come at that problem from many different angles. Okay, so just to get you thinking a little bit, we wanted to ask you this question. So talk to the person next to you about this question, you know. Think of 1 or 2 truly innovative new business models that have been launched by non-startups, because it's easy to mention the big cool Silicon Valley startups. Well, this came out, and so think about sort of established companies. Can you come up with someone who managed to come out with something that was truly innovative and successful? Okay, so just a couple of minutes with the person next to you, or the person behind you, if there's no one next to you. Okay, guys. So we'd love to hear a few suggestions. Anyone up for what did you guys talk about? This is you, yeah?
We talked a little bit about maybe Amazon. They did the selling book stuff, and now they're selling nearly everything in streaming services. And I actually think they looked into what are called drone delivering, so they can quickly deliver now as well. And then we talked a little bit about Vestas, which was an example just from before you came, which now is not only providing wind farms but also sustainable energy plants.
Exactly. Exactly. Those are two great examples.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Amazon is sort of the somehow the world's biggest startup that just keeps on having that mentality.
Maybe one comment to Amazon also. You could also argue that actually when Amazon came out, they tried to, even the business model at the time of selling stuff over the internet, you might say that's not really new. But a lot of companies at the time, they tried to sell, a few products at high margins, where Amazon, they were trying to harvest the power of what you call the long tail. So they said, okay, actually having a lot of stock and a lot of also online solutions, ebooks and so on the web, it doesn't cost us anything to have it in stock. So it's okay, we have those rare small things where only a few people buy, but actually because we have such a huge range of products, then that can actually be a sustainable business model. So already at the time when they came out, they tried to do something different than other companies.
Yeah, please.
I think Tesla, because they started with cars and then now they are selling just the battery packs. And another example is, I don't know if it qualifies, Indian Space Research Organization. They used to be like a government body that used to do space research.
Excuse me, what company was that?
Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO. It's like NASA of India.
Okay.
So they launched 104 satellites and made a world record last year, I think. And most of the satellites were commercial. So they are entering into that kind of business now.
Okay. That's what comes out if you have a lot of great engineers, right? But that's a good example as well. Let's move up here a little bit. What did you guys talk about?
I think we talked briefly about mobile pay.
Yeah.
Which came from Danske Bank, which is a sort of established organization. Made sort of a startup within Danske Bank by creating mobile pay.
Exactly. I think that's a really good example. They made a unit called Mobile Life, I think, which is sort of now hosting different types of innovative business model injections into everything from robotic investing to mobile pay, of course, which is the most successful one. The interesting thing about mobile pay is it still doesn't make any money. It's still loss-making for Danske Bank, but it has, if you just isolate the effect that has had, but it's actually been huge. It has had a fantastic effect on the brand part of Danske Bank. Okay, so anybody up here wants to share? Otherwise, I'll just throw it around. Yeah, no one? Okay. What about you guys?
No, we did discuss the same things actually. So
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
Okay, fair enough. One last one. Okay. You guys?
Actually, we were discussing the same companies like Mobile Pay or Tesla.
Okay. Yeah. It's actually quite hard to find these. Nokia was another one. I can't remember. They used to make tires or something, Mads, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Before they started making mobile phones. So there's a guy here who has a suggestion. Let's hear him out. Then we'll move on.
IBM started the Watson Group in 2014. It's like a startup, AI startup. It's focused on artificial intelligence and cloud computing. So it has complete autonomy from the parent organization, but still works within the organization.
Absolutely. And we still don't know what the effect of Watson will be. I mean, but it's from talking to our IT guys in IT consultants, it's extremely innovative and powerful. Okay.
You might also say, if we should come with a couple of examples. You all mentioned something that's kind of new to the world, but sometimes it's also okay to think of, something that's radically new to the company. So, for instance, some of you probably know Xerox, selling printers, and they went from just selling one-off printers, to companies to actually sell print solutions. And that's a completely different setup when you look at both the value proposition, but also at what key activities need to be in place and so on, and even the revenue side of it. Instead of selling something one-off once in a while, they had kind of an ongoing subscription to a print solution where they made sure there was always toner in the printer was always working, you always had paper. So it's also a different value proposition actually to the company. And you might think, well, going from selling products to services is not innovative as such. But then again, innovation is really about creating new value for your customers. So if it's just new to your customers, then that's perfectly right. You don't have to, dream up something that doesn't exist. It's about creating new value and creating value for your customers. Good. Then just before going into talking about our way of looking at business model innovation, just a little anecdote about the web WAN and a good example of the opposite of how we talk to our clients about doing stuff. So what they try to do is, some of you might know Nemly. There are, it's a online grocery store that brings out. You had it as case, fantastic. So you all know Nemly, that's fantastic. So basically, web WAN, they try to do exactly the same. What they did, however, was instead of going out, talking to customers, trying to make some small experiments of, how can we make this work, what's important for our business model, both on the internal side, but also the value proposition for our customers. What they did was they went out, made all the infrastructure, bought cars, bought warehouses, made sure they were perfectly ready to launch this huge new thing that everybody just wanted, or at least they thought so. So they raised $800 million and were ready to just go crazy. And what happened was that just within a couple of months, they filed for bankruptcy because they forgot about their customers. They forgot about asking the questions, should we actually build this? Is our customer base or is the world ready for this kind of solution? So they went in, put a shitload of money in these solutions without actually knowing if it was going to create value for anybody. So that's a great example of how we would advise people not to go about innovation. So don't start with, can we build in the infrastructure, but rather the question of, should we build it? And that's really essential for how we actually talk to our clients about it. Predicting the future is difficult, as you saw with the web WAN, and here you have a couple of examples. McKinsey saying that the potential for market for wireless phones could be 900,000 units by 2000. Could they have been more wrong? And the same here, there's no reason why individuals should have a computer at home. So it's just inherently difficult to predict the future. So we have to conduct a series of experiments to try and see how can we then be part of creating this future that creates value for somebody. And existing companies, their business model can somehow be a little bit of an immune system to new ideas. And that's why we see companies like Danske Bank creating Mobile Life, or Project X as they started out calling it, or Leo Pharma creating their own also lab, giving them $1 billion Danish crowns and saying, go figure out something fun about psoriasis. So existing businesses, they need to exploit the potential they have at the moment in their current business model. But at the same time, they need to try and explore what other options are there for us. And that is inherently difficult. And that's why some companies, well, they do as Danske Bank, Leo Pharma, they create new units outside the company because they know it's so difficult for people to think differently once they have one business model in mind. And others, they try to create processes inside their companies to actually try and spark this new innovation and explore new opportunities. And we help companies do both. And depending on your situation, there is not really a right or wrong answer. But what I'm going to tell you about today is more about the internal part. So what if you decide to keep it inside your company and try to explore new opportunities? How could a process around that actually look? So we created this concept called Build a Business in 90 Days. It's a catchy title, right? It's not really about building a business as such in 90 days, but it's a framework for how we work with innovation. And the key thing here is really that new business generation doesn't have to be completely unpredictable. You know, a lot of people, you know, with the lean startup and so on, you know, saying we need to do a lot of build, measure, learn loops and learn fast, and that's great. And I think one of the key messages from Eric Ries is really that you can do this in a structured manner. And another thing is that if you look at statistics about startups, where do the ideas come from? Then actually 70% of all ideas in startups, they come from previous employment. So that's a pretty horrific statistics when you think about existing companies, right? So what we're actually saying is that you had all the ideas in the company, but you didn't create the right opportunity for those to actually grow. So people, they fled your company, went out on the other side, created a business that then became a competitor to you. So that's exactly what we're helping companies trying to mitigate. And this triangle, I just mentioned before the difference between can we build it and should we build it. So Web1, they really went out, can we build this infrastructure? Instead of should we actually build this infrastructure? And you can say that that's really the difference here between working in parallel or serial in this triangle as you see it. So what we have in the different layers is we think it's interesting, we can build it, users think it's a good idea, they're willing to actually buy it, we can actually operate the business model and therefore also make money. And a lot of companies goes to this bottom up in serial, and they start one place and say, okay, that's exactly what Web1 they actually did. Okay, we think it's interesting if we can bring out groceries to customers. And we can actually build this. And then they came up to users think it's a good idea, and they figure out, oh, well, they actually didn't at the time. And by then they had invested so much money that, you know, going into a new direction was simply not a possibility. So what we advise companies to do is actually work in parallel with all these things. So make sure that you actually work with all elements of your business model from day one. Make sure you don't start building first and then, you know, wait for a long time before you ask your customers. Make small prototypes or even prototypes. Go out, get some feedback, come back, adjust, and so on and so forth. So it's very important to actually work with all these elements from the beginning, both the internal part, if we can operate it, but especially the part about the customers. Are they, you know, do they think it's a good idea, and are they willing to spend money on this? So what we created is this framework. It looks maybe a little confusing from here, but actually the key part is, again, as I said before, it doesn't have to be so unpredictable to create new business. So, you know, if you kind of set up a fast-paced process where you force yourself to make iterations, so that's also why you'll see business case version 1, version 2, and then in the end, it's version 3. So in terms of just 12 weeks time, you'll have 3 different iterations on your product, on the whole actually business case and business model. And you can see here that we have customer interactions throughout the whole process, and that's really key to again answering the question, should we build this business model? So we don't make huge market analysis to start out with and use 3 months on just doing that. It's just a small part, trying to analyze the market, go out, ask the clients, the customers, get an idea of, you know, what is it that they think is interesting, go back, research more, create a prototype, test it with clients, and do that in loops.
Maybe just an addition here is, you mentioned sprints, right?
Yes.
Sprint is a key word. The term sprint is each of these 2 weeks on the top is a sprint, and that's because it's a finite sort of a number of hours basically that you're allowed to work on this. you could go on forever and ever analyzing market and mapping customer journeys. So you're constrained by the sprint, and that's because you will never be able to obtain full information anyway, and your market analysis will probably be based on historic past data anyway. And as we just showed, we can't rely too much on that. So that's why we really time box it and work with sprints.
Exactly. That's really a key part of how we then work within this sprints with key events. So having usually every 4 weeks we would have a demo session, also where it's about making whatever insights you've gotten as tangible as at all possible, present that to key stakeholders inside your companies and customers alike, to get some sort of feedback as well. So these rapid learning loops, that's really important to actually do fast-paced product development. And yeah, these are some of the key elements of the process. So make sure you validate your business model, as you've also been working with, testing value proposition with prototypes. And actually, another funny thing about prototypes is the thing that when you present something to customers, if you present something that's polished and been working on this prototype for a year and now you finally show it and it looks like a million, it's actually really difficult to get honest feedback from your customers because it already looks finished. So it doesn't invite to people saying, that's complete crap. It invites people to say, yeah, that actually looks okay, even though they might think that's never going to fly. It doesn't bring me any value. So making fast prototypes that actually doesn't look very nice, but kind of proves what it is you're trying to do, is very important. It shouldn't look too well. It should look like a prototype. Otherwise, it's very difficult to get good feedback. And let's see the next one. Here we go. So these are some of the 8 tools that we work with. And you will, of course, notice here in the bottom, the business model canvas is a key part of it. And usually when we work with companies, we have a dedicated space where we then have posters hanging with the with the business model, but actually also with Osterwalder's other canvas, the value proposition canvas, which is what you'll see up here. And then see how that changes over time, because it shouldn't be static. And that's why we prefer to work visually on walls with post-its and colored cardboards, because it's simply easier to change things. Oh, it shouldn't be there? Okay, then we just put it there. And at the same time, it's an easy way to share information between all team members. So if you sit in this room and you have the business model, things change, everybody will see the things change all the time. So that's also a very important part. So these things, the customer journey, as you will see up here, the customer journey is hanging in the room, so is the business model, so is the value proposition. And then we also use this define and score assumptions. And sometimes, to come up with assumption of what needs to be true for this to be a great business model and a great concept, sometimes we use the business model to make sure that companies and the people there, they actually come up with assumptions that's about all elements. Because what we usually see is that, the value proposition is here in the middle, but very often we see people have an easier time come up with assumptions about the key activities to make this work, the key resources, and this basically the solution. So again, all the answers, all the hypotheses, and the assumptions about, behind, can we build this? That's usually what is the easiest thing for people to create assumptions behind that, where you could say all the assumptions behind, should we actually build this? Does it deliver value is there somebody who's willing to actually pay money for this solution? These are some of the key hypotheses and assumptions that you need to test quickly. But if you just ask people to come up with random assumptions, they often forget it. So we use, for instance, the business model canvas to make sure that the assumptions actually cover the whole board, the whole business model. And then we score these based on the impact they will have on the solution, and also on the uncertainty. How uncertain is this? So, for instance, if we have an assumption like our users, specific segment, is actually willing to pay money for this. That in some cases would be very uncertain. We might not know. But at the same time, it has a huge impact on whether or not this is going to fly. So therefore, we would then place it on this 2x2, again, hanging on a poster in the room with the team. And they'll see, okay, so this is a very important hypothesis, and we need to test this quickly because it's critical for whether or not our business model is going to fly. So you could say one thing is the tools that we use, and it's important to use a business model canvas and so on, but it's equally important of how you actually work in this process and make sure you always work with the most critical assumptions. Just before ending up and kind of just have a very open Q&A with you guys, then we have created this kind of with inspiration again from different thought leaders, Jake Knapp as well from Google, make the Google Design Sprint and so on. We make sometimes, now we call it build a business in one day, well, piggybacking on what we call the other one. But what it really is accelerating learning. And so what the video you'll see in a second is an example of this. We invited 6 different, very innovative companies in and said, okay, bring a challenge. So they already brought a challenge. Then we asked them in the workshop, so try and frame this to give you the best possibilities to come up with a really cool solution. Unfortunately, I don't really have time to go into detail of exactly how we do these things, but just to give you an idea. And then we say, okay, and you need to understand the user. So create a user journey. Try and get some empathy for what are the different jobs that your users are trying to get done. What are the pains that they meet along the way? And what are some of the gains that are really important for them to actually feel that this is a great idea. So actually the whole first part, the first 2 steps here is about understanding the challenge in depth and understanding your customers. Then we go into some rapid ideation where we get them to come up very quickly with a lot of different ideas, because one of the keys to actually come up with one great idea is to come up with a lot of different ideas, and usually the best idea is hidden between ideas or by combining different ideas. And then right after, we tell them, now you need to try and make a prototype that describes some of the assumptions behind this. So what needs to be true for this concept to be a great idea? And then work with prototyping something so you can test those assumptions quickly. And then we send them on their way out of the building. And so they get a feel for telling this to other people and tell it, kind of just get it over your own lips as well. And then the very last thing is that you pitch this. Usually we have some senior managements from the company coming in, so they feel the urgency also and maybe gets a little sweaty palms and have to actually pitch it to a senior manager. And that usually also makes the pitches a bit better. So, but now we'll just show you how this then could look in practice.
machine, it's like a default. You missed the starting gun for everything you've ever done. You took part in the race, but disappeared without a trace. You thought you'd set the bar, I never tried to work it out. We just lit the fire, and now you wanna put it out. Forget about the cause, press rewind and stop and pause, it's like a default.
Insightful,
informative,
inspiring, intense,
Intense, breakout of mind,
challenging, and challenging.
fast way of innovating,
Fast-paced,
energized.
fun.
Great fun.
Seeing this structured process was very helpful for us, and I can take that back with me to my company.
So yeah, we could just have told a bunch of companies, you know, just ideate, and then 2 days later they would have maybe had an idea and forgot everything about the customer. But having kind of a structured process like this, then in a one-day workshop, you can get a lot further than you actually thought possible. So this is very often part of some of the processes that we run with companies. Yeah. So now we hope that you guys might have some questions to the stuff that we presented. Now we went through it pretty quickly, but anything about business model innovation, you're more than welcome to ask.
Yeah. There we go.
Thanks. So what is the product or the service that your customers end up with at the end? So where are we in the business model implementation track, if you could put it that way? Because I've heard about many companies doing this you do it in 1 day. I know a guy, Jakob Bøtter, who does it in 5 days. So where are we? How far are the companies?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It depends. Again, that's really the question, the answer. It really depends. But sometimes we usually use these one-day workshops to kind of accelerate the ideation. So a lot of work before this workshop has gone into defining the challenges, finding the opportunity space that we want to ideate around. And then when we get out of this workshop, you have maybe 5, 6 different ideas that have been to some extent validated by some customers and to some extent validated by some senior managers. So you have an idea of, okay, where do we think there's most potential? And then as soon as you're done with the workshop, then a lot of work then again goes into taking these maybe 5, 6 different concepts. Okay, so these 2, they were not so good. So we'll work in this direction. And then again, you'll do iterations on maybe 3 or 4 of these over and over until you figure out where is it that there is most potential. And an example is that recently we made the 7-week process for a big marine OEM, where in 6, 7 weeks we went from not really knowing exactly where we were going to end up, other than the fact we need to go away from just selling products to put a layer on top, some sort of service, digital, maybe not, and in what direction. So we went from that, used our workshop in week 2 to come up with concepts. And then we ended up the process after these 6 or 7 weeks, having validated it 2 other times with customers and having basically 3 concepts described with full value propositions and business models and business cases for what this could do for the company. And then just 2 months after, they had the first paying pilot with some customers. So this is an example of how then this could be. But it depends from the company how far you get along the lines of this. But of course, it's limited how much you can do in 1 day. So it's to kickstart the process, you could say.
But I think to your question, and given that we're implementing, we're extremely obsessed with the fact that this should just be a fun day with a workshop and cool process that feels really engaging and so on. What's the value in that if nothing happens, right? If there's no additional revenue at the end of the day, or additional profit, or additional growth, or additional customer satisfaction. So I think we're extremely concerned just do it for the fun of it. I think that's where we tend to differ a little bit versus others.
Yes.
What exactly is the customer journey? You talked a lot about it, but I'm not sure what you mean.
So yeah, again it depends on the customer at hand, but it could be a simple thing as if you have to go out and buy a vacuum cleaner, then the customer journey is from when you started thinking I actually have the need for a vacuum cleaner, or you have a problem, it's very dirty at home, so already there you start your journey, your customer journey towards buying something. So you figure out, okay, it's actually really dirty, I don't have anything to clean with. Should I buy a broom, or should I buy a vacuum cleaner or whatnot? And then you figure out, okay, I need a vacuum cleaner. Next step. Fair enough, you need a vacuum cleaner. So what kind of vacuum cleaner? What kind of features might there be? So you can see there are kind of different steps, and that's what we call the customer journey, all the way towards taking the decision to buy a product like a vacuum cleaner, to then saying, now I don't need this vacuum cleaner anymore, I need to dispose of it. So how do I actually get rid of my vacuum cleaner? Can I send it back to the company, or can I just throw it out in normal trash and whatnot? So it's kind of the whole kind of process from cradle to grave, you could say, of the product.
So I don't know if everyone can see this, but it's basically if you envision sort of a big line with some different touch points, and these touch points are when the customer will meet your company. So let's imagine I need a new insurance. I just bought an apartment. I need an insurance for all my stuff. I need them. Then I'll start browsing on the internet. Need insurance. Who's out there, right? That's my first step. Then I might get in contact with a specific insurance company. That's first mode of contact. That's here, and that's where you sort of need to enlighten them a little bit about the customer's opportunity. Then let's say he actually buys the insurance. Then he receives his policy. Then a year later, then in between nothing happens, right? Then suddenly his bike is stolen. So that's the next part of his journey as a customer with you. And then he suddenly has a family, he buys a house, then he needs a house insurance and so on. So sometimes the customer journey can be very long and based on, say, the different life stages you go through. But if imagine like you're the customer of Copenhagen Airport. Your customer journey starts in the morning when you check, is my flight actually departing on time and so on. And then you need to go through security and all that stuff. And you can basically, the idea is you can enhance the experience at each touch point. And that's how when we work with customer journeys with our client, we actually look what is the most important touch points for me, and how can I increase my value to you as a customer. So that was that's the customer journey.
And you could say that also often there's some business model innovation opportunities lying in the customer journey. So it could be, if we take again the vacuum cleaner example, maybe you only sell a vacuum cleaner. But what if there's a huge pain in actually getting the vacuum cleaner bags? Oh, it's annoying, I don't know which one I need and where should I buy it and these things. What if you integrate that as part of your value proposition to your customer? Then maybe your business model can generate actually more value. So sometimes when you outline this customer journey, you can actually also see opportunities for creating more value, both for your own company, but also for your customers.
Okay, follow-up question to that? Yeah.
There's also a question up in the back afterwards.
Yeah, I just have a follow-up here. So if you have a recurring problem, let's say, for example, I'm hungry, I need to eat something, would you consider that to be one long customer journey, or like I'm hungry, I'm gonna go buy groceries, and then I get hungry again, so I go buy groceries?
Of course,
you could. I mean, if you're co-op, for instance, they'll map the customer journey based on when you might be interested in visiting one of their stores. So yes, and they obviously know that when you're hungry, your options might be takeaway, might be a restaurant, a cafe. It might be going to a store and buying some of their products. So they might think about it in that kind of way. but it's usually from the, it's the customer journey. You build that based on the consumer, if it's a consumer product, and how the company is engaging consumers. So it's a little bit of a mix. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, there was a question up here somewhere. Yeah.
Skal lige turn it around?
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. When you approach digital transformation problems, challenges, do you usually prefer to propose new technological solution, maybe related to your key partners, or to improve the digital solution that have maybe some lacks, some problems in your customer, in the company of your customer? I don't know if I
think my first comment or thought when I hear the question is, for us at least, the technology is never the answer in itself. So if a customer comes to us and say, we need some new technology integrated in our products, and give me some AI and some Watson and some whatnot, our first intuition will be like, but why? And again, back to the question that I talked about before, can we build it versus should we build it? Of course we could integrate some AI in some way in your product, but would it create value to your customer? So kind of the technology is never the point of departure. It's always, how do we create more value for the customers? And then that might result in us, putting together companies and partners that we also partner with that can help each other in one way or another. I don't know if that was an answer to your question.
I'll just try and elaborate with the way we think about it is, again, we obviously have a framework for everything, but we think about the demand side, and then we think about the technology side. So imagine this is basically customer demand, right? And this is technology, and this is existing, and this is existing, and this is new, and this is new. And basically, what a company like Uber did, right? They took an existing demand, the need for transportation that taxi companies had been offering for a while, and they took, so that was an existing demand, need for mobility, and they took an existing technology, which was GPS-based or whatever tracking, and the app, mobility apps was around already. So Uber basically was here. They didn't need to move up in completely new technologies. So from, you could, up here you could add AI, you could add advanced robotics, you could add all sorts of new technologies that are hyped, right? Internet of Things, IoT. Customers come to us and they ask, how should we think about IoT? It's like, well, are customers actually changing demand patterns? Or are your competitors threatening you based on offering new stuff? If not, then you don't need to add new advanced digital stuff, because we know it also destroys a lot of value if you don't do it properly. So sometimes you can actually meet new demands with existing technology. Sometimes you need, if you're really up here, then it's a tricky. That's a real digital transformation. Then it's a long project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I saw some other hands. Any other questions?
We have time for one or two questions more. Anyone?
There's one up
good.
here.
Perfect.
Hello. How is the work-life balance at Implement?
Great and different question. Yeah, okay.
We should have brought a slide on that.
Yeah, we should have brought a slide on that. Well, it's actually really good. Of course, the thing is, I'm not gonna try and paint a picture of that it's a 40-day or 40-hour work week necessarily, but it's not necessarily a McKinsey week of 70, 80, 90, and it's not like Implement, owns your ass. So I think there is a good work-life balance. I use a lot of spare time on working out. I love doing obstacle course racing, so I work out every single day, and there's time for that as well. So it's not that your whole life suddenly becomes consulting if you want to be a consultant. There is the opportunity to have work-life balance, and there's a lot of flexibility in terms of taking long weekends and things like this, as long as you meet your targets. Nobody's gonna see you stamp in the morning or stamp out in the evening. It's as long as you get the tasks that you have done, then there is actually also an immense amount of freedom. So I think there's a great work-life balance, and that's one of the reasons why I chose Implement. So I have the chance to do other things on the side as well.
Another thing to that is, even though we have a lot of young people, a lot of people coming in, people that are still studying, working as consultants 20 hours a week, our average age is 36 or 37 actually, which means most of people in Implement have 2 to 3 kids, and that does something to the lifestyle. It's not a triangle where as some other consultancies are, where the average age is 30. So that does something to the culture, and one of our biggest, I would say, sort of values is autonomy. So you choose your own leader and Implement. You're not allocated, here's your boss. You choose it based on who you like and who you think is inspiring. You can have as much holiday as you want, as long as you meet your targets, but you can plan it whenever you want and so on. And those are because we know people will stay with us for a lot longer if we give them autonomy. So that's really a big thing with us, and we try to be extremely concerned with it. Doesn't always work, but I mean.
Perfect. Thank you. Time is running, so thank you so much. Really inspiring. Big hand of applause, please. And I'll see you in here 10 minutes past, so have a nice break.